When I moved into Willow Creek Reserve, a sprawling, picturesque suburb just outside of Austin, Texas, I thought I'd found my little slice of heaven. Manicured lawns, friendly waves from neighbors, and the kind of quiet that lets you hear the cicadas buzz on a hot summer evening. I brought two things with me to my new home, a minimalist set of furniture and the one true love of my life, a 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1. This wasn't just a car to me. I'm a graphic designer by trade, and this machine was my canvas, my escape, my 5-year-long passion project. I bought it as a rusted-out shell and poured thousands of hours and a significant chunk of my savings into bringing it back to life. Every bolt, every wire, every stitch in the leather was a decision I'd made. Its raven black paint was so deep you could get lost in it, and the chrome shone like a promise. In a neighborhood full of identical white and silver SUVs, my Mustang was a piece of rolling American art. And for the first few months, it seemed like my neighbors agreed. I got thumbs ups, questions at the local grocery store, and even a few offers to buy it, which I politely declined. My car was my therapy. I never blasted music. I never peeled out. And I treated the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit in the neighborhood like a sacred text. But my quiet happiness apparently registered as a personal insult to one person, Karen. The undisputed queen and iron-fisted president of our homeowners association, Karen was a woman who seemed to be fueled by decaf lattes and an unquenchable thirst for control. Our first real interaction was at the community mailbox. She glanced from my Mustang, parked perfectly in my driveway, to me, and said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "That's quite a car." Little loud for this area, don't you think? I just smiled back and said, "She's actually quieter than most new sports cars. Just a classic rumble." That was my mistake. I had engaged. A week later, the first notice appeared in my mailbox. A crisp, cream-colored envelope with the Willow Creek Reserve logo embossed in gold. It was a formal violation warning, citing a nebulous bylaw about vehicles needing to be in pristine factory condition and not constituting a visual nuisance. I laughed out loud. The car was in better than factory condition. I typed up a polite, professional email back to the Homeowners Association board, attaching about 15 high-resolution photos of the Mustang from every conceivable angle, pointing out that it was, in fact, pristine. I thought that would be the end of it. A simple misunderstanding. But with Karen, hey, there were no misunderstandings, only battles to be won. The following Saturday, she showed up at my door, holding another envelope. "This is your final warning, Alex," she said, her voice low and serious, as if she were defusing a bomb. "Some of us move here for peace and tranquility, not to have our property values threatened by that." She gestured to my car with a flick of her wrist, as if shooing away a fly. I just stared at her, dumbfounded. I was no longer dealing with a reasonable person. I was dealing with a tyrant whose kingdom was a cul-de-sac. A threat hung in the air for a solid week. A toxic cloud of suburban passive aggression. I had to push it out of my mind, focusing instead on the annual Hill Country Cruise, a massive car show that brought out the best classic and custom vehicles from all over Texas. It was the event I'd been looking forward to all year. The entire reason I'd pushed so hard to get the Mustang's restoration finished. Taking my car, my work of art, to that show felt like the perfect way to silently rebuke Karen's ridiculous campaign against me. It was my chance to share my passion with people who actually appreciated the craftsmanship and history. On Friday night, I gave the Mustang a final polish. The deep black paint reflecting the garage lights like a starless midnight sky. The chrome trim was so bright it almost hurt to look at. I checked the tire pressure, topped off the fluids, and laid out my driving gloves for the morning. I went to bed feeling a mix of excitement and defiant pride. I woke up the next morning just before sunrise, around 6:15. The air was cool and crisp, the perfect day for a drive. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling my kitchen, and walked to the garage. And pressing the button on the wall, the door rumbled upwards, slowly revealing the horror within. First thing that hit me was the smell, a caustic chemical stench of paint thinner and acetone that burned my nostrils, and then I saw it. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted into a black, icy abyss. My car was destroyed, annihilated. This wasn't the work of some petty vandal. This was a targeted, hateful execution. The beautiful raven black paint I had spent months perfecting was a ruined mess, bubbling and peeling away in grotesque sheets where paint stripper had been maliciously poured all over the hood, the roof, and trunk. Vicious. Paint gouges were carved along both sides of the car, scraping all the way down to the bare. Silver, metal. Someone had taken a crowbar or a screwdriver and just dragged it from headlight to taillight. The word eyesore was crudely scratched into the driver's side door. They had smashed the windshield, shattered the gauges on the dashboard, and slashed the black leather seats. I had stitched myself. My dream was a corpse. Because then, my doorbell rang frantically. It was my next-door neighbor, Lily, a young mother of 2. She was pale, holding her phone with a trembling hand. Alex, oh my God! She whispered. My front door camera caught something last night. I got an alert for motion around 2 in the morning. She showed me the footage. It was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the streetlights. But it was undeniably clear. 2 figures creeping up my driveway. One was short and wore a distinctive floral bathrobe, Karen. The other was a lanky, awkward teenager who I recognized as her son, Kevin. The camera angle didn't show them entering the garage, but it showed them walking toward it with purpose. Kevin clutching a can and some kind of tool in his hand. The video was the smoking gun. The shock that had frozen me in place began to melt away, replaced by a cold, quiet rage that burned hotter than any fire. I just stood there, with the scene of the crime before me, with the evidence in my hand. And I knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. In the aftermath of the discovery, a strange calm washed over. The kind of clarity you get when the worst has already happened and the only path left is forward. I didn't yell, didn't punch a wall. I picked up my phone and began to move with methodical precision. First, I took pictures, not just a few, but hundreds of them, documenting every last scratch, every slash, every single drop of paint stripper on my garage floor. I captured the desecration from every angle, creating a comprehensive and heartbreaking visual record of the assault. Next, I called the Travis County Sheriff's Office. Within 30 minutes, 2 deputies were at my house. They walked into my garage, and their professional demeanor instantly hardened. This wasn't a case of kids with a can of spray paint. This was a felony. Good Lord. The older deputy said, shaking his head slowly, "This is one of the worst I've seen. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars in damage here." I showed them the footage from Chloe's security camera. The deputy squinted at the screen, then let out a heavy sigh. "Well, it's Karen," he said, with a tone that suggested this was not his first encounter with her. Figures. They took my statement, Chloe's statement, and the video evidence, and then they walked next door. I watched from my window as they knocked on Karen's door. She answered wearing a plush, pink silk robe, a mug of coffee in her hand. It immediately launched into a performance worthy of an Oscar. She feigned shock, then outrage, then pointed a finger directly at me. I could hear her voice carrying across the lawn, accusing me of being a public menace and suggesting I'd probably done this myself as part of some elaborate insurance fraud scheme. Her son, Kevin, was conveniently at a friend's house. But her story was flimsy, and the deputies knew it. They left her with a stern warning and the promise that an investigator would be in touch. My third call was to my lawyer, Ben. Ben was a shark in a tailored suit, a man who lived for righteous battles and complex property disputes. I sent him the photos and the video. He called me back within 5 minutes. I could practically hear him smiling through the phone. Alex, my friend, he said, his voice buzzing with energy. She didn't just cross a line. She blew it up with dynamite. We're not just going to make her pay for the car. We're going after punitive damages for malicious intent. We're going to make an example out of her. He laid out the strategy, let the criminal case proceed on its own, while we would simultaneously file a massive civil lawsuit against Karen and her son, Kevin. Personally, we would get a formal appraisal for the car's value pre-destruction, and that would be our baseline. Meanwhile, the Willow Creek Reserve Homeowners Association board caught wind of the situation and went into full-blown panic mode. I received a letter from their high-priced law firm 2 days later. It was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, expressing deep regret for the unfortunate incident between neighbors while explicitly stating that Karen's actions were her own and that the Homeowners Association carried zero liability. Ben just laughed when I read it to him. Perfect, he said. They've officially abandoned her. It's just us against her now. A week later, a process server delivered a thick packet of legal documents to Karen's front door. Our lawsuit had been filed. It was for the full appraised replacement value of my Mustang, plus legal fees, plus a substantial figure for punitive damages and emotional distress. The quiet war of passive aggression was over. The real war had just begun. The wheels of justice turned slowly. But they do turn. It took nearly 8 months of legal maneuvering, depositions, and rejected settlement offers before we finally found ourselves in a Travis County civil courtroom. The air was thick with tension. I sat next to Ben, wearing my best suit, feeling a nervous but resolute calm. On the other side of the courtroom sat Karen and her son, Kevin. The Homeowners Association's insurance had, as Ben predicted, completely washed their hands of her, leaving her to foot the bill for her own defense. She'd managed to hire a cut-rate local lawyer who looked overwhelmed and deeply regretted his life choices. Kevin just stared at his feet, his face pale and clammy. He looked less like a vandal and more like a kid who had been forced to do something terrible and was now facing the consequence. Ben began our case with a quiet, powerful presentation. He didn't start with the crime, he started with the art. He put up a slideshow of my Mustang in its full, restored glory, huge, glossy photos of the gleaming black paint, the immaculate engine, the hand-stitched interior. He had an independent, certified appraiser on the stand who testified that the vehicle, due to its rarity and the quality of the restoration, was valued at a staggering $190,000. Then, he presented the evidence of the crime, the photos of the destruction, the sheriff's report, Chloe's testimony. Karen's lawyer did his best to poke holes in the case, arguing that the video from Chloe's camera was grainy and inconclusive. You can't prove my client or her son ever set foot in that garage, he argued with a burst of false confidence. That was the moment Ben had been waiting for. He smiled faintly and turned to the judge. Your Honor, he said, we have one final piece of evidence to present. The courtroom screens flickered to life. The video was sharp, clear, and shot in full color. It was from a small, motion-activated wildlife camera I had placed on a high shelf inside my garage months earlier, hoping to find out what critter was getting into the trash cans. I'd completely forgotten about it until weeks after the incident. The footage was damning. It showed Karen and Kevin stepping into the garage. The audio was crystal clear. Go on. Kevin? Make it ugly. Karen whispered, her voice laced with a venomous glee. Show mister. Big shot what we think of his trashy car. Kevin hesitated for a moment. Crowbar in hand, "Mom, I don't know about this." He mumbled, "Do it," she hissed, giving him a shove. "Or you'll be grounded until you're 30. Scrape it down to the metal." The camera then recorded the next 10 minutes of systematic, brutal destruction in horrifying detail. The courtroom was utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen's face had gone from a confident smirk to the color of ash. Her lawyer slowly sank into his chair and put his head in his hands. The judge, a stern-looking man in his 60s, stared at Karen over the top of his reading glasses with an expression of absolute disgust. He didn't even wait for closing arguments. He slammed his gavel down. "In light of this appalling evidence," he said, his voice booming through the silent room, "this court finds for the plaintiff. He awarded me the full $190,000 for the car, an additional $50,000 for emotional distress, and then, looking directly at Karen, he added another $100,000 in punitive damages. The total judgment against her and her son was $340,000. It was a sum, so